Coming to you from deep within the heart of Texas in our secret underground bunkers, it's the New Republic Radio Show. Welcome everyone to the Monday night edition of the New Republic Show. I'm your host, Keith Clark, and I'm going to be bringing you a great show today. We've had a great day here at the underground bunker. It was a little warm for a fall day, but you know what? Anything under 100 degrees in Texas is great, and I'm really happy for winter to be coming on. I'll definitely be happy when it gets much cooler. But yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed the day out there. We got a great show for you. A bunch of different topics we're going to be talking about. Ahmadinejad to meet with Occupy Wall Street. More Americans now commit suicide than die in car crashes. Taboo in America of speaking about politics. And also in our liberal land section, we're going to be talking about voter ID laws and how the liberals use that as a talking point for disenfranchisement. So, got a great show amongst other topics. Got a great show going on though. So sit back, enjoy whatever you happen to be doing. I hope I can stimulate some ideas or some thoughts in your head. Maybe, teach you about something you didn't know about or something that you're not hearing in the local news or the big national news. That's what this show is all about. But anyway, go ahead and sit back and we will begin. First off, I want to talk about a quick contest that we're doing. On our YouTube page, we are giving away a set of Sennheiser in-ear headphones. $50 is what these guys go for. Very nice. The best Sennheiser makes the best headphones money can buy. These don't happen to be them because they don't cost $5,000. Anyway, but they're a great set of headphones, no less. But anyway, all the contest, all you have to do to win in the contest is subscribe to this channel, and that will enter you in. After we hit 50, once we get the magic number of 50, we will be giving away a pair. So go ahead and press pause or whatever. Go click subscribe. And of course, if you click like, that's also, you'd be being a great friend of the New Republic. So anyway, back to the show. Report. Ahmadinejad to meet with Occupy Wall Street. I don't know, this on one hand doesn't surprise me, but on the other hand it terrifies me. Now, as my loyal audience knows, Occupy Wall Street was backed by the Canadian Communist Party. But it makes sense since they are an anti-capitalist organization that someone like Ahmadinejad would be so interested in them. But the thing that kills me is that being so out in the open about it, and I have not heard any retraction, I've not heard any, somewhat official Occupy Wall Street person come out and say that, no, this is, this report is not the truth, or, we would never meet with somebody like this. I've not heard anything like that. And that just blows me away because if the average young folks, and I mean the educated, college-educated young folks of America that mainly make up the Occupy Wall Street movement, if these folks are okay with being associated with Ahmadinejad, then there's something seriously wrong. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because I know that the media is not really talking about that. Moving on, Iran commander says could launch preemptive strike on Israel. And here we go again, more Iran saber rattling, more Obama doing nothing. He went on The View earlier today, I believe it was, which I'll talk about in a moment. Hadn't talked to Netanyahu, nothing. He acts like he just does not care about the entire Iran-Israel situation. Japan protests as Chinese ships enter disputed waters. Again, tensions are getting higher over with Japan and China. And what do we hear? From him on high, Mr. Obama, we hear nothing. I really don't understand why the national media is not, I'm sure they're aware of it, but why are they not concerned about it? Now, I know he's trying to win an election, but does he just seem to think that, hey, it doesn't matter, once I get nominated, then I'll worry about all this mess that's going on, but big focus is just being nominated? Is that kind of idea that's crazy to me. I mean, you're just going to let the entire world burn, and hey, I don't really care. I'm trying to get elected rather. So yeah, that just is really getting me there going. Anyway, more Americans now commit suicide than die in car crashes. Guys, that is just sad. I mean, here we have more Americans committing suicide from poisoning, leaping. That seems to be like two of the biggest things in this article. But yeah, I mean, I know, during hard economic times, I realize that, more people commit suicide. But seriously, if you don't think that your country is in dire straits, just look at the numbers. We have more Americans committing suicide than dying in multi-thousand-pound vehicles crashing. To me, that is just insane. The View over Netanyahu. Yeah, that's right. Obama put off speaking to Netanyahu, blew him off, told him to beat sand, and he went on to The View. And of course, he did the same thing and went on to Letterman. He did the same thing with Jay-Z to get more money for his campaign. And of course, they had $110,000 champagne display. Seriously? I mean, Romney's out of touch with Americans, but yet Obama's not. But he has $110,000 champagne display. Romney out of touch, Obama in touch. Yeah, seriously, come on, people. Anyway, moving on. Obama knew about Benghazi terror attacks 90 minutes after they began. Went to bed. So 90 minutes after the Benghazi terror attacks happened on 9/11, he hears about it. Then he says, you know what? Not a real big deal. Think I'll go to bed. You know what? I'm not a huge George Bush supporter, but even him, I don't see that happening. I think he would have done a lot more. I don't know what. But I can't imagine any president other than Obama doing something like that. Anyway, that's the kind of president that we have. I just thought you folks might want to know. Let me know what you think. 979-31-TALK-6. Give me a holler. Political clubs, bars, and churches. What do these three things all have in common? Well, as you've heard in some of my earlier shows, that is where people met, discussed, and kind of bounced ideas off of each other during the American Revolution. You see, America has changed a whole lot in 230 plus years. And one of the biggest ways that it's changed is the simple fact that now it is completely taboo to talk about politics and, of course, religion and, of course, sex. That's the old saying. But here's one thing that I just don't understand. I mean, maybe I do understand it, but I can't believe that we would let it take precedence. This whole idea of not talking politics in polite company. Let me tell you something. It's one thing to be polite. It's another to be led to the slaughter like sheeps. And let me tell you something. This whole idea of don't talk politics in polite company. Don't talk about it with your friends and your family and those type of things. See, this is the type of problem that we have caused, and we've kind of put the whole issue on ourselves because of this. Because now that we don't talk about politics, unfortunately, our populace is mostly ignorant of politics. Yes, they might know, they might know a little bit about Democrats and a little bit about Republicans. They may know a little bit about somebody who's running for president or the sitting president, but that is about it. And they don't know much else beyond that. They don't know what these politicians stand for. Not even the people that are running for president. They can't name vice presidents. They can't name the governors of their states. Simple things that everybody should know. And as I've done a lot of research on this, one thing that I'm finding is all over the world, there's really two type of country settings where talking politics is acceptable and talking politics is not acceptable. Now, generally around the world, where it's acceptable to talk politics are in democratic countries, free countries. In those countries, it's completely acceptable, and it is talked openly about, it's discussed openly about all over the world. Then you have the other side of the picture, which is, for instance, in dictatorships, communistic countries, places like that, of course, politics are not acceptable. You can't talk about them openly, obviously. You can't talk about them hardly behind closed doors because you never know who's going to basically snitch on you. But the horribly sad part is, here in America, it's one of the biggest free countries, not acceptable. Not acceptable to talk politics. So I want to go into a bunch of questions of why and how we can change this and the benefits of changing it. Now, the biggest reason that I want to go basically way back, the biggest reason why it's unacceptable is because over the years, sadly, as the American education system became worse. And what I mean by that is, yes, maybe earlier times we didn't have a lot of folks, went to like 8th grade, had to drop out, go work on the farm, family farm and stuff like that. Way back in the day, okay? We're not really talking about that so much. But I'm talking about when the state-funded state schools started happening, basically being built and set up. The way that we educate our young people in this nation, unfortunately, kind of predicates this whole situation. Okay, and what I mean by that is, our founders were educated in a much more traditional, what's called a classical education. And the main points, the main goals of a classical education is that once a person graduates from, say, high school or whatever set of schools that they attend, they're basically able to communicate orally, communicate through written means. And what I mean by communicate is not, hey, I'm hungry, or I'm sleepy, or I need money. No, I mean communicating ideas, truly communicating. Basically, a lot of the focus was put on that when one spoke to a crowd, that your oratory skills were good enough to take whatever idea that you had, and pretty much everybody in that room would be able to understand it. That if you needed to write something, like write your ideas and your feelings on a piece of paper, that at the end of that, the average person could pick up that piece of paper, read it, and understand complex ideas and get the thoughts and the feelings and everything. Okay? And the other part, which is so important that we need to get back today, is they were taught dialectics. And dialectics is basically the science of arguing. And I don't mean arguing in my point's wrong and I'm just going to argue and argue and argue. I mean discussion, discourse. Basically, we come at each other with two different ideas and we talk about it and we discuss it and we discuss the finer points of each side until one or both of us come to one side or the other, or we completely come up with a whole new idea altogether, because two minds are a lot of the time better than one. Now, these three things, oral, written communication, the ability to argue and carry on a dialectic with someone, these are the three things that made our forefathers such exceptional people. Because on average, almost all of those guys had that ability. All right, that is the reason why they were able to come up with a constitution to build a republic that has lasted 230 plus years. And that's how they were able to think so far ahead. Yeah, is it perfect? No. Does it have its problems? Yes. But let me tell you what, it's come a lot further distance in a better way than any other republic ever created. So, basically going back to everything of what I was talking about earlier is we need people that can truly communicate. If people were able to communicate with one another and were able to discuss and openly, basically change each other's mind or influence each other's mind in positive ways rather than how does political debate go nowadays? Well, one person starts talking, the other person hears it, they get mad because it's not their opinion. And what do? They either start yelling, they either start cussing, or they throw their hands up and leave. Basically they just run away from it. Now, if this were 200 years ago, what would happen is one person would start discussing their opinion. After they were done, the other person would start discussing their opinion and their sides. And of course, that's the other thing. When we're discussing opinions, we generally just express that opinion. We don't talk about why it may be good or why it may be bad. But again, going back to our education. But yeah, back then it would have been two people talking the pros and the cons, going back and forth, discussing both sides, maybe even bouncing some new ideas off each other, and either one side coming to the other side or one side going to the other side, or hey, maybe they come up with a whole new idea. Or worst case scenario, at the end of the discussion, at the end of the dialectic, you had some great ideas, I had some great ideas, I understand where you're coming from, but I just don't feel that. So, we're going to agree to disagree. But the thing is when people meet on equal terms like that, you don't have to worry about all the getting upset and yelling and hollering and, I'm not your friend anymore and all that garbage. Now, granted, were there some rough political fights and things like that? Yes, obviously there was some duels that came about from issues like that, but those were extreme cases. 9 times out of 10, that's not what happened. But that is the problem is today with our education system, the government schools do not, once we graduate 12th grade, honestly, it's a miracle if we can read and write. And that's horrible to say. But it's the truth. There are a lot of folks out there that graduated that do not know how to read and write. Now, I am sorry, but if you don't know how to read and write, there is no way, I promise you, there is no way you're going to be able to properly communicate your ideas with me, either through speech or through paper. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. Then let's go to the whole idea of a dialectic. I'm sorry, you're not even gonna make sense to me if you start trying to pose your ideas to me, the pros and cons. So my suggestion, my hope is this. We have to bring this idea up. We have to expand this idea, take it out to people, let people understand it, bring it up to the teachers, bring it up to the educators, so that they can know, they can look at it and they can say, hey, you know what, you're right. We need to focus on helping people to communicate with one another. And again, not through language, just they know the English language and they can order a Slurpee from the gas station. No, I'm talking about real communication. So if we could go out there, educate people, and change the education system, then we could have more civil, more discussion, more ideas, more good ideas. Folks, we've got a lot of problems in a very modern society. And if we have less than 1% of the population, and I promise you it's a lot less than 1%. If we have less than 1% of the population that can truly think critically, we're in trouble. We are in serious, serious trouble. So what can we do about it right now? Well, what we can do about it right this moment is we can educate ourselves. We can learn better how to communicate to each other. We can learn better how, through written means, communicate better. We can also learn how to discuss and argue topics. We can learn what dialectic means. We can get better at it. We can learn about red herrings. We can learn about straw men arguments. And hey, if you want to go look those up, that's awesome. That'll get you headed in a good direction. But that's the thing. First, we have to get people to understand the education system needs to be changed. Then we have to change the education system to match those needs. Then once we're done with that, we will have a bunch of people running around America that are basically like our forefathers were, like the people who created this country. And then we can move on from this whole Democrat versus Republican thing, where ultimately they're so close and they have such similar ideas in so many ways. We can actually have a real two-party system where one party actually has a considerably different idea than the other party. And then, wow, they can talk about things and bounce things off each other and actually come up with real things to do, real answers to tough questions. But the way the system has been set up now, and it was purposely set up the way that it is, but the way the system is set up now, we can't have political discussions. Sadly, people are educated in certain ways, but they're not educated in ways to have a truthful dialectic, to be intellectually honest to themselves. And without any kind of real communication, they're just like Obama or Romney or any other politician out there. They're just talking a bunch of talking points, a bunch of hot air. They're not really saying anything. You just wait till the political debates that are coming up. I promise you, you will see exactly what I'm talking about. These people are full of hot air. They're not saying anything. They're giving 20-minute speeches, or just like, Bill Clinton giving a 43-minute speech. He talks a whole lot, but he doesn't say anything. You know, that was one of Bill Clinton's hallmarks, is he could sit there and talk for an hour, but he would never actually say anything. That is not someone who is orally gifted. That is someone who's basically, they're just playing the part. They're a good actor. There's no real substance. Let me tell you what, I promise a political speech from George Washington or Lincoln, a 40-minute political speech, that would have some substance. Go back and read some of their speeches. Those were real things to talk about. But again, how does all this start? Well, we have to get past the stigma, the stigma that is about political discussion. We have to get past that. Okay? How are we going to do that? Well, we have to make a conscious effort. You know, maybe before you start talking to somebody about it, why don't you bring up that particular subject and just say, hey, you know, this is crazy because I know everybody always says, you know, don't talk politics to your friends. But, you know, the funny thing is when our country was created, that's almost all anybody ever talked about was politics. And, you know, something good came out of that. So maybe we ought to talk about it. And then, you know, hit on your little subject or whatever. Put it any kind of way that you want. But, yes, at first people, when you hit them with anything political, they're not going to want to talk about it. They're going to want to, you know, if it's not something they agree with, they're not going to want to talk about it. They're going to want to run away from it. They're going to want to, you know, if they're smart enough to give you a few talking points, they're going to want to put those up. But the thing is we got to get past that. We've got to get it to where it's like, okay, people are every once in a while going to talk about this. Yeah, you know, if you're like me and you talk about it 24/7, people will just be like, well, you know, that's Keith. But, you know, to all you folks out there, if you do it every once in a while in decent amounts, obviously you got to do it. You all have to do it a lot. But I'm saying, like, yeah, I don't expect y'all all to go out and just do it 24/7. But when the moment presents itself, we've got to do it. We've got to do it because, look, when the revolution started, the American Revolution started, politics were discussed in taverns, also known as bars, in churches, which was a huge, huge prominent portion of it. Because that's a good place to talk about it. And I know that's a huge taboo now because of the whole IRS issue. But it's just that's just a part of reality. That's what was going on then. Then you have political clubs. Men and women, obviously more men back then. But people met together in what they called anything from, it was like, you know, coffee houses, taverns, whatever, the bars, whatever you want to call it. They would meet together and they had these clubs where they literally talked about politics. This has been going on since Greek times. People, don't give me that argument about it's just something that people don't like to talk about. I'm sorry, you're full of BS because we've been doing it for thousands of years. It's just that unfortunately in America we kind of have our head on backwards here. And that is leading to so many of our political problems. But the only way to really take care of it is to change this stigma in America, to revert it back to older times when talking about politics was not a problem, was not a bad thing. It wouldn't lose, you wouldn't lose friends over it. You wouldn't get fired over it. You wouldn't lose Facebook friends over it. Whatever. I mean, that's the thing. Bring it up however you have to. But maybe you coach it in a certain way. And what I mean by that is like I was saying earlier. Maybe you just bring up the fact about how, wow, isn't it crazy that Americans don't talk politics anymore when that's how our country was founded? Hey, look, there you go. That's the perfect way. That's the perfect way to bring up these type of politics. These type of subjects. And then at that point, it at least gets the person thinking. They're going, hey, you know what? That's true. That's true. So when you don't have a popular idea with them, they'll be like, well, yeah, but maybe we should keep discussing this. Maybe we should talk about it. Who knows? Who knows how it's going to happen? But it starts with you and I. It starts with me. It starts with this radio show. It starts with the New Republic. It starts with you, the audience. We have to go out and change this day by day, piece by piece. So I'm counting on you folks to take this country back. Just at least take it back to the point where political discourse, conversation, discussion is not taboo. So anyway, that's the end of that discussion. Any questions or comments on it, give me a call, 979-31-TALK-6, 979-31-TALK-6. All right, I know I'm kind of monopolizing your time, but look, that was a big subject, and I had to delve deeply into it. I hope maybe you got a little ideas or maybe get that ball rolling for you. Moving on, liberal nonsense. This is our section where we go out into the liberal media and we find things that are just blatantly wrong and we make fun of them, talk about them, or just debunk them. This I found here on Liberal Land. That's Combs' website for his radio show. Voting laws could disenfranchise 10 million American Hispanics. Now this, they've really been, the liberal media has really been pounding this about how the showing your ID is just going to disenfranchise Hispanics, blacks, every type of minority you can think of. It's going to be a huge problem. But here's the thing, I just happened to go to our Texas website and I was looking it up, and if you need an ID will cost you $16 and it expires every 6 years. If you need to renew it, it's only $6. So I'm thinking $16 over 6 years. Yeah, I just don't see that disenfranchising anybody. That is just an excuse so that unfortunately the Democrats will have more ability to create more fraud. And I hate to put it on the Democrats like that, but if you look at it, Republican or Democrat, Democrats are way more into the voter fraud. There's been more documented cases of it happening. And honestly, that's the reason why they bring it up. The other thing is it rallies their base because it's a talking point they can use. And they can say, ooh, look at these big bad Republicans. They're disenfranchising you. You got to get out and vote against them. But yeah, anyway, that's just seriously $16 over 6 years. That's really, that's going to keep people from voting. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. I couldn't really, there were so many stories on it, I couldn't find one that I wanted to use, so I'm just going to talk about it in general. But anyway, I'm amazed at how the liberal media at this moment is so focused on the polls. Like they're all, ooh, yeah, the race is not even winnable by Romney. He's so far behind. But then yet there's these other polls out there that, of course, are not done by CNN or not done by, hugely Democratic polls, Democrat Party organizations. And, of course, those polls are contradictory. So they have two stories. One is, hey, Obama's way out there. And then there are a few people, they will at least address it, and they'll say, why are the polls contradictory? And, of course, they come up with, the reason why some polls are those polls are not necessarily accurate. But let me tell you this, all of those polls, I'm not going to go into it because it's very dry conversation, but if you look up and you find out how these polls are done, you will find that, wow. Like, I don't know how. You definitely wouldn't want to try to plan your picnic by these polls, because I'm sure your picnic would get rained on. It would have a hurricane and a tornado all at the same time, because they use the craziest stuff to weight the polls. The metrics that they use are just, I don't understand it. I mean, I understand what they're saying. I don't understand why they use it, why they do it the way that they do. It just seems so much easier to go out, and poll 1,000 people and ask each one, well, after they get their answer, well, what, are you Democrat or are you Republican, or whatever, conservative, liberal, whatever. But get that information. And then if you get to 1,000 people and you figure out, dang, you know what, I asked 85 more Democrats than I did Republicans. Well, go out and find some more, poll some more people and find out some, find some Republicans or some conservatives to ask so that the poll can be equally weighted. But none of these polls do that. They almost always have a bias to one side or the other. And I don't know if it's purpose or if they're just lazy or what. But when you start reading into it and you start finding out what a particular poll, they'll eventually say, well, we sampled 10% more Democrats than we did Republicans. Well, how is that a good poll? I mean, obviously, then there's going to be a 10-point difference if you had 10% more people. So anyway, the biggest thing is I would tell all of you, don't worry about polls because they're complete, for the most part, they're complete BS. And the funny part is the frustration with the polling metrics. That has actually led to the creation of a website called unskewedpolls.com. So they're trying to actually, either make sense of the polls or go out and do their own thing. But yeah, the whole poll thing, the only polls that are actually accurate are the polls that the campaigns run themselves. Because obviously they don't want to lie to themselves. They want to know what's really going on. But we never get to see those polls. We always get to see the Gallup poll or the other national polls. And unfortunately, 99% of these polls, they have an agenda. So, yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up because that's continually frustrating me. I did a little research, I believe it was last week, into how these polls exactly are conducted. And I'll be honest, I was completely dismayed, and that's the last time that I'll ever pay any attention to a poll, which of course is the reason why you see all these exit polls and stuff that right before the end of an election, the election night, everybody will be saying, oh yeah, so-and-so won, and then of course at the end of the night, the other person wins, and everybody's like, well, wait a minute, what's going on? That's the reason, is because just the way that they do the polling is just completely bunk. So anyway, that's it for the show. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know I went way long, so I apologize about that, but we had some pretty big subjects to talk about. So I hope you enjoyed. Again, enter in to win your pair of headphones. Just take less than 5 minutes out of your day to either create an account or to look up your old password or to try to figure out your old password, something. Come on, folks. Just click subscribe. And if you have a little extra time, click like or click dislike. Either way, I don't care, up or down. I'll take either one. But anyway, folks, y'all have a great one. Go out, have a great day. Spread the wealth around. Spread the love around. Give some smiles out. Be nice to folks. Do a good deed. Take care of your community because it'll take care of you. I'm your host, Keith Clark, and that's a wrap.